All right, Garrett Blevins here with Form Assessment Saturday number. I believe we're on number 8, actually, even though I think I mislabeled this. But whatever number we're on, this is the forum in which the calls will be taking place from this point on. I'll get through as many in the thread as I can today. And then if I don't get to any, I'll attempt to move them to the next thread when I create it. And the rest of you out there can post videos as well in that next week's call, and we'll see what we can get done. So start off here with Marshall having trouble preventing his back from rounding as the weight increases. So we've got a heavy single here. Pull starts at 44. Excellent. Helpful. We'll hop right in here. Sound off. And all right, I want to see some of your setup as you get closer here. So one of the things I'm just noticing as you're setting up, you've got a substantial round here already in your back. So you're working around. You've been working for 40 seconds. Is there a rep in? Okay, so there's a rep in here before. I actually want to see this whole video as we go through. I want to see some of your setup. I like that you're getting neutral there. So a little bit of impatience off the floor. I would say you're trying to go a little too fast, and some pause work right off the floor may help you learn how to brace a little bit better, because as you come up, there's a little bit of rounding that initially starts. Your hips rise first. The bar is not breaking off the floor. So let me just play through, because we're seeing this issue already in these earlier sets. So notice as you come, watch how your hips are going to rise faster than your back here. Notice how the hips come up and the shoulders move forward. Now, in your pump, where you're pumping here, you're really not loading your back. You're really bringing your hips down to the bar. What I want you to think of when you're doing that hip down and the knees come forward a little bit, I really want you to lean back, rotating a little bit at the ankles. It's going to take a while to feel it exactly right. But get to where you're actually pulling the slack out of the bar and creating more tension with this part of your back moving upwards as you go backwards and pull and wedge up against the bar. That's what you're looking for with the pump. Here you're more kind of just bringing your hips back and forth. And what eventually happens is when you pull on the bar, your hips rise and you lose your back position. You'll see it back's in a good position. And then right here, as your hips came up, you get this little bit of rounding. And that's going to become more pronounced as you go forward. But working on your setup, making sure you get a lot of tension on the bar before you start is going to be really important. I think that you should start with your hips a little bit higher than you are right now and continue to just work on bracing. Pause deadlifts are really going to help you work on that because they're going to punish you if you have any of this rounding. Instead, you can work with lighter weights with pause deadlifts and really reinforce the proper starting position where your hips are moving up and your shoulders are moving up at the same time instead of having those shoulders move forward. Pause deadlifts are a great variation to work on that. But let's get this back to normal speed. Pretty sure I'm ready for what we're going to see here in this single. Yeah. So when you're coming down again, you can really see it on this rep. You're not really pulling up on the bar and generating tension with those pumps. And that's something you want to do more of. This is really, you're bringing your hips down. That said, it's not a horrible rep. I've certainly seen a lot worse, but you definitely get that rounding right here. And again, that's something you need to work on by generating more pressure and more pull on the bar before you start the lift. Pause deadlifts will also be a good variation to help you for that. But practicing your setup and thinking about rotating and leaning back from the ankles, taking your entire body backwards as you bring those hips down will also help you generate tension on the bar. Because basically, if you're not holding onto the bar and you lean backwards around the hip, or sorry, around the ankle, you would fall over. And you're going to be using that bar to counterbalance yourself. But keep working on it. This is kind of a chaotic and dynamic starting position. So just be aware that you're going to want to work to be as consistent as possible because you're really setting up with a lot of movement in the lift, and that takes practice. All right, moving on. Got Chris, merged a couple of different angle clips, doing some heavy sets of 5 on squat. Got the last 2 reps in the video, so you can see only 3 of them. Easier to judge. All right, yeah, I'll see what I can I can tell here from this. Okay. So first thing I would say is it looks like this is one of those belts with the bigger back and the thinner front. I really, if you can get an actual power belt, I advise you to do that as soon as you can. These belts are not great. So one of the things I'm seeing here is a lot of hip movement. Your hips are going all over the place. Really, you want to set your hips neutral and then brace into that and not change from that position. You'll see here that hip kick back right there. That's going to lead to that pelvic tilt. So let me play this a little bit slower for you. You were in a fairly neutral position. You get into a decent position, and then you actually arch back and you kick the hip backward right there, and this pushes you into extension. Now you've put your back into extension, and what's going to happen is you go down, usually just about an inch or so or 2 inches above parallel. Your femur, as it rotates and moves through the hip socket, it's going to contact, and you're going to feel kind of a pinching feeling or a pressure in the bones of your pelvis. What's going to happen to work around that is your back here is going to have to loosen and round so that the femur, which is here in the hip socket, can actually move around and finish the lift, and you get this little tail tuck issue. Instead, if you started with your hips more neutral, that would put the hip socket in a slightly different position so that the femur would be able to move through the range of motion and you would be able to hit depth without needing to loosen your back. But you'll never be able to do that if you go into extension. Where you want your hips to be and what you want to brace into is really more here. This is where you should start breaking at the knees and start just thinking about squatting down between your legs instead of the arch that you go into and then hips back. So you'll see it as it comes down. Right about here is where you hit it, and then there's a little bit of that tuck. It's not a bunch, but it's more than should be there. And notice how far your hips come forward to finish the rep. You go out of extension, and then you hit neutral, or maybe even a little bit extended past neutral. That wiggling back and forth is going to blow up your SI joint at some point as well. And you're going to get some inflammation there, and it's going to be hard to train rep work. So the biggest thing you can do is work on finding the neutral hip position and then bracing and holding that neutral hip position throughout the entirety of the squat and not going into extension. 90-90 breathing drills are a great exercise to include in your warm-up that can help you with that issue. But I really want to see less hip movement. It goes neutral, and then it kicks back out of neutral, and then goes back in. You see there, you can see that arch even more. Yeah, it's just kicked too far back. So other than that, things look pretty good. Your rack position stays pretty stable. Your knees kick back just a little bit out of the hole, but it looks pretty good overall. Not seeing a whole bunch of issues on this rep. This knee comes in. I want you to watch that knee valgus on this side. Really don't want to see that knee coming back in the way that it does. So just be sure that that is something you're continuing to work on. Warm up the hips. Make sure that you're having that knee track over the toe and then back up the exact same way. This seems like a fairly light weight, so I'm surprised to see that there. But again, a lack of stability in the hips can lead those knees to do some funny stuff. And if you're not getting those hips neutral, that can bleed through to all the other areas of your body. So focus on the hips first, but then make sure and film from the front like you are here, and make sure those knees are tracking out and back in the exact same pattern. All right. All right. All right. Let's check it out. See what we got going on here. I'm liking the setup with the American flag and the rogue stuff here. All right. So first thing I'm seeing is as you come back, looks like your knees are a little soft. So I would like to see you stand up a little bit straighter as you bring the weight out of the rack. The next thing is you kind of do this where you're kind of bending and feeling the weight. I really want you to get out of that habit. Instead, just step back, set up, and then go straight into your squat. So again, it looks like you are extending a little bit more than you need to. This position, it's a little tough to tell with the shirt out over the shorts, but it looks like here you're moving into extension. And I think you're doing that so that you maintain an upright spine. But again, finding that neutral position of the hips is going to allow you to get better depth and be in a better position. I can see that you're really bound up around your hips and even in your lower back. I mean, I don't know how often you sit during your job or your work, or what sort of commitments you have to that. Your age can also play a factor, especially as you're getting into lifting. But mobility is going to be the most important thing for your ongoing success and staying injury-free. What I want you to do is I want you to make sure you're warming up your hips before you squat, as well as adding in a 90-90 breathing drill. I'll probably harp on that, but it's probably the most useful drill for people who are either fixing their squat form or learning to squat properly. So again, just go to YouTube, type in, I can probably pull it up here even. I'll show you the video that I reference frequently. All right. Here we go. There's some different variations here. You can see Quinn Hennock has a couple of videos on it. You might check out a variety of these. There's some different variations that he has. But this drill will help you learn where neutral is for your hips, and it is an extremely useful exercise in your warm-up. Additionally, for you, I want you to really start working into the that lower back and the hip itself, opening up those hips as you continue to lift, so you can maintain that back position. Because you're getting a little rounded over, even through the upper back too. You might try, if you can, placing the bar slightly lower. And just based on the way that you're squatting, this bar is coming forward now. You don't need to bend at the hips too much. This rep was your best rep until you lost your balance there. But the descent on this rep was actually better. Let me back this up. So notice how upright your torso stays in the descent. And you've got a little bit of upper back grinding. I really want you to work, again, this is a mobility thing. I'd be willing to bet that you sit kind of leaned over a good amount in your daily life. And that posture is something we're gonna have to work on as you move forward. So continue, mobilize that upper spine. I want you to get 2 or 3 hip mobility drills that you do before you squat. I want you to do the 90-90 breathing drill before you squat. And what I want you to do, if you post again for these form reviews, I want you to film exactly from the side of the squat. I want you to put the camera exactly where the end of the barbell is when you unrack the weight. So probably about, if you took the camera over about 1.5 feet, it would be in line with the barbell. And I want to show you what's going on with your bar path. The descent of this squat was great, but you really have to maintain your bracing and your positioning here and not let that bar get forward on you like it did right there, because then you're utilizing your back and you're almost doing a good morning, which is not the exercise you want to be doing with a squat. I would also advise just lightening the load a little bit here. Sometimes that feels like a step in the wrong direction, but it's kind of that 1 step back, 2 step forward sort of idea. So lower the weight and continue working on repetition work. I want you to work with that until you can hit depth without any lower back rounding, and where you're keeping a very straight line, or as straight as possible, bar path with those lighter weights. Once you demonstrate control of that, you can start to add weight, and it'll start piling on the bar pretty fast. All right. Okay, so I added this one. This was a client of mine who just competed. I've been working with him about a year, I think now. It's been a number of months. But his total has increased 75 kilos in this last year, and just wanted to do a review of his video, kind of to benefit most of you out there and see some of the things that can happen in competition. I'll say here, one of the things that the client mentioned is that it was strange not having a mirror in front of them. And that's one of those things that you want to take away from yourself. If you squat in front of a mirror but you're going into a competition, be sure that you stop using that mirror. I mean, I worked out in a gym where literally every squat rack faced a mirror. I would put a mat, or I would put a sheet or something over that when I was squatting, or just tape up a piece of butcher's paper or something like that with some blue tape, or talk to the gym owners if you think it's going to be a problem. But get those mirrors out of there, because you're not going to have those in meet, and it can really jack you up. But overall, this was a great meeting. I wanted to highlight this. So one of the things I just want to note is look at the tightness of the belt here. You can tell that it's snug, but it's not digging into where, you know, the stomach is spilling out over the top or anything like that. This is a good example of correct belt tightness that you can actually brace out into in the squat. You'll notice also, look at the hips coming neutral here at the start. It's a good starting position. And those hips maintain in that position throughout the entirety of the rep, which is very solid. I really, there's not a whole lot. Your squat form looks very good, and you start in a good position here. Again, solid squat. A little bit of knee valgus. You'll see that on the left knee here. Again, that's something where you just have to keep training, but you correct very quickly, and you still hold the rep well. That was a great second attempt. Still moved really well. And I watched this video. As soon as you sent it to me, I watched the video once through, and if I remember correctly, I think you nailed this third squat as well. Looked like there may have even been more. Yeah, really moved the weight well. I love to see clients come in and, you know, this is a 75 kilo increase on the total, but you can tell that there were still kilos left on the platform. And that's just a good way to highlight that even when you're training and when you're testing, you don't always want to have the worst, ugliest, crazy grinder, especially in a competition. Instead, it's better to set yourself up with success or you train a little bit longer, have a little bit longer training cycle that leads into a meet that allows you to increase your strength more. You can come in, you can leave some on the platform, and you know, and you leave with confidence rather than frustration at missing a third, maybe only matching a PR or being slightly under a PR in your second attempt and feeling like you're not making any progress when in fact you are making progress. You just weren't able to display it. This strategy is a better way of doing it. And that was a great third squat. Your bench looks solid. I know you went this was a little bit heavier. I believe this was a PR for you regardless on the second attempt, and I believe you go 5 kilos up between these. Definitely with that mid sticking point that you have when you grind through something like that, and if that happens again, just take the 2.5 kilo jump. Sometimes that can be tough to do on bench where you're only going up 2.5, but this is definitely a pretty slow second attempt, and you've just got that sticking point there. One of the things that I wanted to note is that it sticks so much here because that weight starts to drift down. So one of the things that I want to make sure you're doing, spoto pressing can be good for this, is being able to reverse the weight out of this position. So you'd want to spoto, you'd want to pause right about where the bar is here, or maybe even a little bit lower, because if you watch carefully, you're going to see your hands move away from you. And what that's telling me is either you're losing tightness through your arch, or your shoulders are coming out of position and are starting to drift up towards your ears. And that's bringing your elbows, obviously, are coming with that, but the bar isn't moving. And that creates that slight forward motion you see there, which then, if you're out of line there, you have to use a ton of front delt to correct that. It's getting out of the groove in the bench press. Again, very good attempt. You struggled with it hard, gave it your best shot, which is admirable. And then onto the deadlifts here. Paying attention to the setup, setting yourself up right, patient off the floor, very solid lockout. Good attempt. Deadlift form and form in general on these is very good. It's good to see someone execute with weights that are PRs and yet not have form breakdown. You really don't want to see that. And additionally, in your training, you don't want to see form breakdown either. A little bit of hip rise out of the bottom. I think you were a little bit faster on that attempt to kind of go with it, but still very solid. I'm interested to see here if that hip rise becomes more dramatic or if you correct here on this third deadlift. So what I'm watching right now is as you come down, grab the weight, waiting to see if slight hip rise, but you were a little bit slower and more patient. Very solid rep. And I think more on more to come, definitely. Be sure as you set those weights down that you hold that bar all the way to the ground. I think you do, and I think that's why it wasn't an issue. But just as I watched this, I had to kind of do the double take to make sure that your grip was on it the whole time. So when you set it down, make sure you set it down solid in the hands. obviously you can tell based on my recommendations that my daughter and I have been watching some videos. Anyways, okay, so I think we got what, 1, 2, 3. We got 3 more. I'm going to move these 3 video clips on to next week's call. We'll start with those, and then anyone else who wants to add in, the website here is guidedprogramming.boards.net. Go to the, what did I call it? I believe Form Assessment Saturday tab, and put your links to YouTube videos in there. We could mess around, maybe try Instagram, but I think Instagram plays a little bit worse, and I can't scrub through quite as accurately as I can with YouTube. But I hope this video was informative and helpful. Again, I'll see if I can maybe also find some good hip drills. Based on where your hips are tight, various drills will, you know, hit different spots, but that seems to be a common theme, especially with the squatting videos we've been reviewing. So in any case, I'll see if I can find some good stuff. If I can, I'll make those resources available to you. In any case, I hope wherever you're at, you're doing well. Blessings.